In this video, we're going to write code which will enable our user to change their password. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look in the code at our change password form. Okay, so that's the form responsible for updating the password. So the ID of the form is right there. Okay. And if we look at the different fields, or before we move there, we can see the actual error message. So let's change that to update password message. Okay. And let's change the ID to update password message. Okay. So here are the different fields. Okay, current password, password, and password 2. Okay, so now let's save and create our Ajax call. All right, so we can copy the first Ajax call and just amend it. Okay, so the ID of our form is update password form. Okay, and the file we're going to be sending the Ajax call to is update password. And similarly, if something goes wrong, then this file updates password is going to return an error message. Okay, so if data, we're going to show the error message inside our error message. So in our case, the ID of the error message is update password message. Okay. All right. Otherwise, we don't have to reload the page. Earlier, we reloaded the page only to show the new username. So we're going to delete that. Okay. And if there is an error with the Ajax call itself, then we're going to update the error message for updating password. Okay. So that's it for our Ajax call. So let's save this. Now let's go to our PHP file. So, first of all, we're going to start a session, okay, or restart the session, and connect, okay. So we're going to need to connect to run queries later on, okay. Then we're going to define error messages, okay. This is very similar to what we did in the sign-up file. So let's open the sign-up file, as we're going to need to copy some code later on to save time. Okay. So after defining the error messages, we're going to check if we've got any errors. Okay. So if there are any errors, or if there is an error, we're going to print an error message. Otherwise, we're going to run a query, okay, which will update our password. All right. Okay, so let's start with starting the session. So to start the session, as we did before, it's session start, and then we're going to include our connection file. To save time, we can just copy that straight away from the previous files. Okay, here we go. All right, now we're going to define the different error messages. So the first error message that you might get is the user not entering the current password. Okay. And the next one is the user inputs a password, but the password entered is incorrect. Okay, it doesn't match the one we've got in the database. So let's define a couple of variables. So missing current password. That's the first one. And the second one is going to be incorrect current password. All right. Then you can choose whatever you like there. Okay. Let's put everything inside paragraphs, as we did in the sign up file. And then the next one is the user doesn't input a password in that field. And let's call that error missing password. Okay. All right. Now the next one is going to be the user inputs a password there, but it's invalid. So we want at least 6 characters in our password, and we want to include at least 1 capital letter and 1 number. Okay. So that's another error. So let's call this error invalid password. Okay. So the next one is we've got a confirmation password, but it's different from this one. So you're going to call it different password. All right. And finally, the user inputs that's one, but doesn't input a confirmation password. And that's going to be missing password 2. Okay. To be able to distinguish it from that one. Okay. So you can write whatever you like in there. I'm going to pause the video and just write stuff in there to save time. All right, now we've got all our error messages. Now we're going to start checking for errors. So the first error we're going to check is the current password missing. Okay, so let's have a look at our form. Okay, and make sure that we know the names of the different fields. So that field has got a name current password. Okay, so now we're going to check if that field is missing. So we're going to check the opposites, okay, of the elements of key current password in the post array. Okay. So we're doing this because we send the AJAX call using the post method. You can also use the function empty. Okay. So you can check if this is empty, like that. All right. So if that's the case, we are going to add one of these paragraphs to a variable that I'm going to call errors. Okay. So the way it works is we're going to check for errors against all these fields, and then we're going to display all the errors, okay, that we found. So for example, if you try to change your password and you submit like this, okay, then it's going to show you all the errors, okay, that actually occurred. All right. So after concatenating all the paragraphs inside the errors variable, to echo one of these, we can just put all the paragraphs inside a div and give it some styling. All right. All right. So now we're going to add to our variable errors the variable corresponding to missing current password, which is this one. A quick reminder, this means plus something that is equal to this. All right. All right. Else, we're going to check if the password which was provided by our user is actually correct. Okay. So first of all, we're going to filter the password. Okay. And then prepare it for the query. And then we're going to check in the database, okay, if that password is correct. So let's go ahead and do this. So first of all, we're going to store the user inputs inside a variable that we're going to call current password. Okay. So that's going to take the post value like that. Then we are going to filter sanitize this value, okay, using the filter var function. So filter var is going to take a couple of parameters. It's going to take this variable, okay, plus another parameter. So in our case, we're dealing with a string, so we're going to use filter sanitize string. Okay. Now our variable is filtered. Now we need to prepare our variable to be used in a query. Okay. So to do this, again, we're going to store the result inside the same variable, which means that it's going to change. And we're going to use the function MySQLi real escape string, which will take a couple of parameters, our connection variable, which is link, and the variable itself, which is current password. Okay, so now our variable is ready to be used in the query, but if you remember, passwords were stored inside our table after being hashed. Okay, so we're going to hash our password the same way we have done in the sign up file. And if you remember, the function we used to hash our password in the sign up file was the function hash. Okay, so you can use exactly the same syntax. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and use it right there. So instead of password, I'm going to have current password. Okay, so now we are ready to write a query and check if this password is correct. Okay, so now we're going to check if given password is correct. Okay, so to do this, we're going to need to go to the table, okay, and look for the record corresponding to this user ID, and then look at the value that we find in the password column. Okay, so to get the user ID, so let's store it inside a variable user ID. So we can use the session array because we stored the user ID in the session array after login. And the key is user ID like this. Okay. And now we're going to write our query. So the query is going to be selecting records, or just selects the password, only the password. We want only the password. So selects password from the table. Okay, so our table is the users table. Okay, and the condition is user ID matches this one. Okay, and then we're going to store the results inside a results variable. So to run the query, we use the function MySQLi query. Again, we've done this many times, so it must be quite used to this now. So it's going to take our link variable and our query as parameters. Okay. Now let's check how many records we've got inside our results object. So we're going to define a variable count, okay, and we're going to store inside this variable the output of the function MySQLi number of rows, okay, of results. All right, so we're expecting this number to be equal to 1. Okay, so if count is 1, okay, this means that we found one record corresponding to that user ID, and we're supposed to get that. Then we're going to retrieve the password from that row, okay? So, and then check if the password is correct. So let's start with the opposite scenario where the count is different than 1. So in that case, we're going to echo an error message, okay, saying there was a problem running the query, for example. Okay, and let's give it a couple of classes. So let's use single quotes outside and double quotes inside. So alerts and alert danger. Okay, so otherwise, meaning count is equal to 1, then we're going to retrieve the password, but first we need to fetch the only row that we've got inside the results object. So again, we're going to use the function MySQLi fetch array. Okay, so this is going to fetch only one row, which is the first one and the only one. So we're going to give it a couple of parameters. So our result object, and if we want an associative array, we're going to use MySQLi underscore associative like this. Okay. Okay. MySQL underscore associative like that. Okay. So now we've got our row, and to retrieve the password from the row, let's define a variable that we're going to call password. Okay, or let's just see if they match straight away. So we're going to compare our current password with the value of the password inside that row, which is row, and we're looking at the element of key password. Okay, same as that. All right, so if they are different, then we're going to add to our errors variable incorrect current password. All right. All right, so now we're going to move to the next fields. So the new password and the confirmation of the new password. We're going to do that in the next video.